She said she spoke 11 languages in the interview. They laughed and she silenced them all. Jennifer Miller took a deep breath as she adjusted her still-stained cleaning uniform from her overnight shift. Her fingers trembled holding the resume printed on plain paper, while the executives in the American Business Corporation's meeting room turned their gazes toward her with a mix of curiosity and disdain. That was when the human resources manager, Richard Peterson, asked the question that would change everything on that Monday morning in New York City. When he questioned her qualifications for the administrative assistant position, Jennifer lifted her chin and declared in a steady voice that she spoke 11 languages fluently. The silence that followed lasted only 3 seconds before an explosion of laughter echoed through the room, led by Richard himself, who pointed a finger at her between chuckles. "A polyglot janitor. That's a new one," Richard mocked, wiping tears from his eyes. "What's next? Gonna tell us you have a PhD from Harvard hidden in the broom closet?" Jennifer felt heat rising up her neck, but kept her posture straight. Beside Richard sat 5 other executives: the international marketing director Rebecca Johnson, the Italian financial consultant Anthony Ricci, the Chinese project coordinator Mei Lin, the German sales representative Otto Wagner, and the operations director Robert Thompson. They all watched the scene as if it were a circus act. "Would you like me to prove it?" Jennifer asked, her voice carrying a determination that contrasted with the vulnerability she felt inside. Richard kept laughing, gesturing for her to continue. "Please show us this extraordinary talent of yours. I'm sure everyone here is curious to witness such a unique performance." Rebecca picked up her phone and started recording. Over the years, she had grown accustomed to documenting unusual situations at the company to share with colleagues later. Richard was known for his peculiar interviews, but this one promised to be memorable. Jennifer looked directly at Mei Lin and began speaking in flawless Mandarin, asking about the origin of her name and commenting on the beauty of Chinese characters. Mei Lin's eyes widened, nearly dropping the coffee cup she held. She instinctively responded in Chinese, confirming that Jennifer's pronunciation was impeccable. She really speaks Mandarin," Mei Lin murmured in English, still stunned. "And she knows specific dialects from the Guangzhou region." Richard's laughter faded considerably, but he waved a dismissive hand. "Anyone can memorize a few Chinese phrases from watching subtitled movies. That doesn't mean anything." Jennifer then turned to Anthony Ricci and began speaking in perfect Italian, not just greeting him but discussing Italy's current economic situation and asking his opinion on recent changes in European trade policies. Anthony nearly choked on his coffee. "Oh my goodness," he exclaimed in Italian. "She speaks better than my own niece, who was born in Rome." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. The mood in the room began to shift. Rebecca stopped recording but kept her phone in hand, fascinated by what she was witnessing. Robert Thompson leaned forward, intrigued. Otto Wagner adjusted his glasses, waiting his turn to be surprised. Jennifer didn't stop there. She addressed Otto in fluent German, discussing technical aspects of German engineering and making specific cultural references from different regions of Germany. Otto's jaw dropped when she demonstrated knowledge of Bavarian dialects he himself had nearly forgotten. "My God," whispered Otto. "Where did she learn that?" Richard was visibly shaken now. His authority as HR manager was being challenged by a woman he had judged by appearances. He rose from his chair, trying to regain control of the situation. "Fine. She knows a few languages. That doesn't change the fact that she has no college degree, no office experience, and clearly doesn't fit our company's profile." Jennifer felt a sharp pain in her chest. It was always the same story. Since she was 15, when she had to drop out of school to work and help support her family, she had heard the same words. She didn't fit. She wasn't the right profile. She wasn't what they were looking for. "Can I explain how I learned?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Rebecca made an encouraging gesture. There was something about this woman's dignity that moved her deeply. As marketing director, she had hired many employees over the years, but she had never witnessed a situation like this. "Please tell us," Rebecca said, ignoring Richard's furious glare. Jennifer took a deep breath before speaking. Her words came slowly, heavy with emotion she was trying to control. I've worked for 15 years caring for the elderly at St. Joseph's Retirement Home here in New York City. I was the only employee willing to learn the native language of the foreign residents. I learned Italian from Mrs. Sophia, who cried with longing for Sicily and just wanted someone to talk to about the olive trees on the farm where she grew up. Maylene lowered her gaze. Her own grandmother had passed away in a nursing home in China, far from family. I learned Mandarin from Mr. Wong, who went 2 years without speaking to anyone because no staff member understood when he asked to call his daughter in Beijing. German was with Mr. Müller, a man who had fled the war as a child and never returned home. Otto felt a lump in his throat. His own grandfather had left Germany under the same circumstances. I learned Arabic from Mrs. Fatima, who came from Lebanon young and developed Alzheimer's. She only remembered her youth in Beirut. Russian with Mr. Sergei, who had been an engineer and spent hours teaching me about the stars while I tidied his room. The room was completely silent now. Robert Thompson had crossed his arms, clearly moved. Even Richard had stopped gesturing, absorbing every word. Every language has a story of pain and longing, Jennifer continued. I learned Japanese from Mr. Kenji, who only wanted to tell stories about Tokyo before the war. Hindi from Mrs. Deepa, who came to the United States in the 60s and never heard from her family in India again. Dutch from Mr. Willem, who built dikes in the Netherlands before coming to work on coffee plantations in California. Rebecca felt her eyes well up. As marketing director of an international company, she dealt with numbers, strategies, targets, but she had never considered the human stories behind each language the company needed to master for global expansion. "And the other 2 languages?" asked Maylene, genuinely curious now. "French with Madame Isabelle, who came from Lyon to marry an American in the 50s and never returned to France. And Swedish with Mr. Bjorn, who worked at Global Motors before retiring here in the United States." Richard was clearly uncomfortable. The narrative had completely transformed the atmosphere of the interview. He tried to regain authority, but his voice sounded less confident. "Very touching, but that doesn't change the fact that we need someone with technical qualifications for the position." That's when Jennifer did something no one expected. She walked to the table where various company documents were scattered and pointed to a contract in English. "May I see this document?" Rebecca pushed the paper toward her, intrigued. Jennifer read it quickly and then looked at the executives with a serious expression. "This contract has 3 critical translation errors that could cost the company millions." Richard stood up abruptly. "What do you mean? This contract was reviewed by our team of professional translators." Jennifer pointed to a specific clause in the middle of the document. "Here, where it says, 'shall deliver within reasonable time.' The Portuguese translation reads as, 'must deliver in reasonable time.' But in international legal context, reasonable time has a specific technical meaning of 30 calendar days, not reasonable as a subjective interpretation." Anthony Ricci stepped closer to examine the document. As a financial consultant, he had dealt with similar contracts. "She's right," he said, scanning the paper. "This ambiguous interpretation could lead to legal disputes." Jennifer continued pointing out other errors, explaining technical nuances that revealed deep knowledge not just of the languages, but of the legal and commercial implications of each term. "How do you know all this?" asked Robert Thompson, impressed. Jennifer hesitated before answering. That was the part of the story she always avoided telling. "For the last 10 years, I've worked as a freelance translator during late nights and weekends. After my husband had his accident and couldn't work anymore, I needed a second income to support my 3 children." The revelation landed like a bomb in the room. Rebecca realized she was looking at a woman who worked 2 jobs, cared for a family, and still found time to refine her expertise. "What kind of translations do you do?" asked Otto with growing interest. "Business contracts, technical documents, engineering manuals, medical reports," Jennifer replied. "I have online certifications in legal and technical translation. I've been studying in my spare time for over a decade." Richard was growing increasingly nervous. The situation had spiraled completely out of his control. He tried one last move to discredit Jennifer. Even if all that's true, you have no corporate experience. You wouldn't know how to handle the pressure, deadlines, or demands of a company this size. Just then, Richard's phone rang. He answered loudly, speaking in English with someone who was clearly an important client. During the call, he mentioned confidential details about company strategies and contract values under negotiation. When he hung up, Jennifer stared at him with a stern expression. You shouldn't discuss sensitive information in front of candidates during an interview. Richard laughed sarcastically. Relax. You didn't understand any of it anyway. Actually, I understood perfectly, Jennifer replied calmly. And I also understood the Dutch conversation you had 10 minutes before I walked into this room. Richard's face paled. Otto leaned forward, intrigued. What Dutch conversation? Jennifer looked directly at Richard before answering. He was arranging to hire his nephew for this position, regardless of qualifications. He said these interviews were just a formality to follow protocol. The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca's eyes widened, Otto gaped, and Robert Thompson stood up abruptly. Is this true, Richard? Robert asked, his voice heavy with authority. Richard stammered, trying to deny it, but Jennifer began repeating the conversation word for word in Dutch, then translating it into English. Every detail she recounted matched exactly what Otto, who was fluent in Dutch for business reasons, had vaguely heard through the door when he arrived earlier for the meeting. My God, murmured Otto. I overheard bits of this conversation when I arrived and thought it was about something else. But she's reporting exactly what was said. Richard's situation has become untenable. Robert Thompson, as the operations director, had authority over hiring and was visibly furious about the corruption discovery. Richard, I want to see you in my office immediately after this interview, said Robert, his voice icy. Rebecca realized she was witnessing a dramatic turn of events. She had started the recording as a joke, but now she felt she was documenting something far more serious. Jennifer hadn't planned to expose anyone. When asked if she had understood the conversation, she simply answered honestly. That was how she had always lived her life, with transparency and integrity, even when it cost her opportunities. Why didn't you say you understood the conversation when you came in? Asked Mei Lin. Because it wasn't my business, Jennifer replied simply. I came here for an interview, not to eavesdrop on private conversations. I only mentioned it because Mr. Richard said I hadn't understood. Jennifer's brutal honesty contrasted sharply with Richard's manipulative attitude. Robert Thompson stepped closer to her, clearly impressed. Jennifer, how old are you? 32. And how long have you been working as a freelance translator? 10 years. I started when my husband, Michael, fell from scaffolding at a construction site and suffered spinal damage. He can't work anymore, so I became the sole provider for our family. Rebecca felt a tightness in her chest. She had grown up in an upper-middle-class family with every educational opportunity. She had never stopped to consider the circumstances that kept talented people in jobs that didn't reflect their abilities. And your children? She asked. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears, but she kept her composure. I have 3. Emma is 15 and in her first year of high school. She's very bright, wants to be a doctor. Ethan is 12 and loves math, and little Lily is 8 and adores drawing. Do they know you speak all these languages? Asked Anthony, genuinely curious. Emma knows some. I teach her English and Spanish, so she'll have more opportunities in the future. The other 2 are still too young to understand the importance. Robert Thompson had crossed his arms, watching Jennifer with growing interest. As the operations director of a company expanding internationally, he recognized the extraordinary value of this woman. Jennifer, I need you to be honest with me. Why is someone with your qualifications applying for an administrative assistant position? The question hit Jennifer like a punch to the gut. It was the question she had avoided facing for years. She looked down before answering. Because I need a job with a steady paycheck. Emma got a partial scholarship to a private school, but I have to prove stable family income for her to keep it. As a freelancer, my earnings vary too much month to month. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. And why didn't you look for jobs that matched your qualifications? Robert pressed. Jennifer laughed bitterly. Have you ever tried getting a job as an official translator without a college degree, or as an interpreter without proven corporate experience? I've applied to over 50 positions in the last 2 years. Every single time I got the same answer: insufficient qualifications. Rebecca felt uneasy. How many times had she herself rejected resumes based on superficial criteria without evaluating the candidate's real potential? But you have certifications, said Otto. Online certifications don't carry much weight with recruiters, explained Jennifer. They want a university degree, an MBA, experience at major corporations. It never matters what you can actually do. The conversation was interrupted when the door opened and an elegant woman in her 60s walked in. It was Dr. Elizabeth Parker, the company's CEO, who had been discreetly summoned by Robert via message during the interview. "Forgive the interruption," said Elizabeth, observing the tension in the room. "Robert asked me to come here. He said something extraordinary was happening." Robert stood immediately. "Dr. Parker, I'd like you to meet Jennifer Miller. She's applying for the administrative assistant position, but I believe we have a very special situation here." Elizabeth looked at Jennifer, noticing the cleaning uniform and her dignified posture, despite the intimidating circumstances. "Pleasure to meet you, Jennifer. Robert, can you explain the situation to me?" The candidate demonstrated fluency in 11 languages and exceptional technical knowledge in legal and commercial translation, Robert explained. "Furthermore, we uncovered an irregularity in the hiring process that needs investigation." Elizabeth turned her gaze to Richard, who was visibly sweating. "What kind of irregularity?" The candidate accidentally overheard a conversation in Dutch discussing favoritism in hiring, Robert said diplomatically. Elizabeth had built the company from scratch over 30 years. She hadn't reached the top by being naive or tolerant of corruption. "Jennifer, could you repeat that conversation for me?" Jennifer hesitated, glancing at Richard, who stared back with a mix of anger and desperation. "I don't want to cause trouble for anyone. I just came here looking for a job opportunity." "Integrity is one of this company's core values," Elizabeth said firmly. "If there were irregularities, I need to know. This won't cause problems for you. Quite the opposite." Jennifer repeated the conversation in Dutch and then translated it into English. Elizabeth listened carefully, asking specific questions about details only someone who truly understood the conversation could answer. "Richard, can we speak privately after this meeting?" Elizabeth said, her tone making it clear it wasn't a request, but an order. Richard knew his career at the company was over. He tried one last desperate move. "Dr. Parker, this is all a misunderstanding. The candidate is twisting what she heard to create confusion and secure the job." Elizabeth turned to Jennifer. "Jennifer, could you demonstrate your fluency in a few languages for me?" For the next 15 minutes, Jennifer spoke fluently in each of the 11 languages she claimed to master. Elizabeth, who spoke 5 languages herself, was impressed not just by the fluency but by the specific cultural knowledge Jennifer displayed. "How did a woman your age manage to learn so many languages?" Elizabeth asked. Jennifer repeated the story about the seniors at the retirement home, but this time went into more detail about each person she'd met and the circumstances that motivated her to learn each language. "Mrs. Sophia had been a teacher in Sicily before coming to the United States," she shared. "She taught me not just Italian, but also told me about Italian literature and the history of her region. Mr. Wong was an engineer in China and taught me about technology while we practiced Mandarin." Elizabeth was fascinated. As a businesswoman who had built international ventures, she recognized the value not only of linguistic fluency, but of the cultural knowledge Jennifer had acquired. "And you did all this while raising 3 kids and caring for a disabled husband?" "I studied in the early mornings, after my shift at the retirement home, and before starting my freelance translations," explained Jennifer. "On weekends, I took the kids with me to visit the elderly. They loved having children around, and my kids learned so much about different cultures." Rebecca realized she was witnessing one of the most inspiring stories she'd ever heard. As marketing director, she constantly worked on campaigns about overcoming adversity and success, but she'd never met someone who embodied those values so genuinely. "Jennifer," said Elizabeth after a moment of reflection, "this company is expanding operations to 12 countries in the next 2 years. We have contracts in negotiation worth over $50 million. Do you have any idea how much we could save by having someone with your qualifications reviewing our international documents?" Jennifer shook her head. "Our outsourced translation department costs the company roughly $200,000 a year," Elizabeth continued, "and even then, we still make mistakes like the ones you spotted in that contract." Robert Thompson stepped closer to Elizabeth. "Dr. Parker, I'd like to propose something unusual." "I'm listening." "How about we create a new position specifically for Jennifer, International Communications Coordinator? She could oversee all translations, be our direct liaison with foreign clients, and train other employees." Elizabeth considered the proposal for a few seconds. "What would the salary be?" "I'd suggest around $8,000 a month to start, with room for growth based on performance." Jennifer nearly fainted. $8,000 was 4 times what she'd asked for as an administrative assistant. "What about benefits?" asked Elizabeth. "Full health coverage for her and her family, meal vouchers, transportation allowance, and an annual budget for professional development courses." Jennifer gripped her chair. It was more than she'd ever dreamed of in all her years of struggle. "There's one important detail," Elizabeth said. "Jennifer, you'd work directly with me and Robert. It's a position of trust, with access to the company's strategic information. Do you feel ready for that responsibility?" I don't know what to say," Jennifer stammered, her eyes filling with tears. "Say yes," Rebecca laughed, moved by the turn of events. "But there's one condition," Elizabeth said seriously. Jennifer's heart raced. There had to be a catch. "You'll need to complete your college degree. The company will pay for you to study literature or translation at night, but it's a requirement for career growth." Jennifer couldn't hold back her tears. It was everything she'd ever wanted but never dared to ask for. "I accept," she whispered. The room erupted in spontaneous applause from all the executives present. Mei Lin stepped forward and hugged Jennifer, speaking in Mandarin about how she'd found a family in the company. Anthony said in Italian that she was an inspiration. Otto joked in German that she could teach the European team. Elizabeth approached Jennifer and extended her hand. "Welcome to the American Business Corporation family, Coordinator Miller." Richard had watched the entire scene in silence, realizing he'd witnessed his own downfall and the meteoric rise of someone he'd tried to humiliate. "Richard," Elizabeth said, turning to him, "let's talk now." After Elizabeth and Richard left the room, the other executives surrounded Jennifer, asking about her story and her future plans. "When can you start?" Robert asked. "I need to give 2 weeks' notice at the retirement home," replied Jennifer. "I can't abandon the elderly just like that. They depend on me for communication." Rebecca smiled. It was exactly the kind of answer she'd expect from someone with Jennifer's character. "What if the company made a donation to the retirement home to hire professional translators temporarily while they look for a permanent replacement?" she suggested. "That would be amazing," said Jennifer, moved. Mei Lin offered to help Jennifer find advanced Mandarin courses so she could obtain official certifications. Anthony talked about connections in Italy that might interest the company. Otto mentioned exchange opportunities with Germany. Jennifer realized that in just one morning her life had completely changed. Not only had she gotten a job, but she'd found a community of people who valued her talents and her story. When she finally left the company building, Jennifer called Michael immediately. "Michael, you won't believe what happened," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Did you get the assistant position?" "I got something much better. They offered me a coordinator role with a salary that will change our lives." On the other end of the line, Michael was silent for a few seconds before he started crying. "I always knew this day would come," he said. "You deserve this, and so much more." That night, when she shared the news with the kids, Emma hugged her mother, crying, "Mom, does this mean I can stay at my new school?" "It means you can dream of college too, sweetheart." Ethan, ever practical, asked if they could now get a better computer for him to study programming. Lily just hugged her mother and said she was the smartest woman in the world. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The following Monday, Jennifer arrived at the company to start her new job. Elizabeth had prepared a special office for her, with computers equipped with professional translation software and a small library of specialized dictionaries in various languages. "This will be your home base," said Elizabeth, showing her around, "but I want you to know you're free to move around the entire company. Your work will involve direct contact with all departments." Jennifer's first task was to review all the company's international contracts from the last 6 months. In 3 days, she identified 17 translation errors that could have cost over $2 million in legal disputes and business misunderstandings. "How did no one notice this before?" asked Robert when Jennifer presented her report. "The outsourced translators are technically competent," Jennifer explained, "but they don't understand the specific business context. Each department has its nuances, and that only comes with hands-on experience." Elizabeth was so impressed with the results that she asked Jennifer to prepare a presentation for the company's board of directors. "You're going to propose a new model for managing international communication," said Elizabeth. "I want you to build a team, establish protocols, and create a system to ensure we never have problems like these again." Jennifer spent the next week preparing a 40-slide presentation detailing her proposal to completely restructure the company's international communications department. On the day of the presentation to the board, composed of 8 senior executives, Jennifer walked into the meeting room with the same determination she'd shown in her interview. "Gentlemen, my proposal is simple," she began. "Let's stop treating translation as a mechanical service and start treating it as strategic intelligence." For 40 minutes, she explained how different cultures interpreted contracts, how linguistic nuances affected negotiations, and how the company could use cultural knowledge to expand more efficiently. "In China, for example," she said, speaking fluent Mandarin before translating, "hierarchy and respect for elders directly influence how negotiations are conducted. Our current contracts completely ignore these cultural nuances." One of the advisors, Dr. William Adams, leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we hire cultural experts for each country?" "I'm suggesting we train our own team," replied Jennifer. "I have contacts in New York City's immigrant community, people like me who came from other countries or immersed themselves in other cultures, but never had the chance to use that knowledge professionally." Jennifer's proposal went beyond translation. She wanted to create a cultural intelligence department that would help the company understand not just what to say in other languages, but how to say it in a culturally appropriate way. "How much would it cost to implement this?" asked another advisor. "Less than half of what we currently spend on outsourcing," Jennifer replied, presenting detailed spreadsheets. With infinitely better results, the board unanimously approved Jennifer's proposal. Within 6 months, she had assembled a team of 12 people, including native speakers of 10 different languages, all hired from immigrant communities in New York City. The first major test for the new department came when the company negotiated a $15 million contract with a Japanese firm. Jennifer didn't just translate the documents, she coached the entire team on Japanese cultural protocol. "In the first meeting, don't talk business for the first 20 minutes, she instructed. "Ask about family, about their trip. Show genuine personal interest. In Japanese culture, business only happens after personal trust is established." The negotiation went so well that the Japanese specifically requested Jennifer as their cultural liaison for future dealings. During this time, Jennifer also began studying literature at New York University. She attended classes from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. after a full day of work. Michael, who had partially recovered from his injuries, took on more household responsibilities to support his wife's dream. "Are you sure you can handle studying after working all day?" he asked, concerned. "Michael, I learned Mandarin at 5 a.m. while changing elderly patients' diapers. Going to college with a steady salary and company support is a luxury," Jennifer laughed. Jennifer's life had completely transformed, but she never forgot her roots. Every Saturday, she still volunteered at St. Joseph's Retirement Home, teaching languages to the staff and chatting with the elderly residents who had been her first teachers. Mrs. Sophia, "You saved my life by teaching me Italian," Jennifer said during a visit, holding the hand of the elderly Sicilian woman who now had advanced dementia. Mrs. Sophia no longer recognized her, but she smiled when Jennifer began speaking in Italian about Sicily's olive trees. A year and a half after being hired, Jennifer was called back into Elizabeth's office. "Have a seat, Jennifer. We need to talk about something important." Jennifer felt a chill in her stomach. Had she made a serious mistake? "The board has decided to expand your responsibilities," Elizabeth said, smiling. "We want you to take over as Director of International Relations for the entire company." Jennifer's eyes widened. "But I haven't even finished college yet." "You have something better than a degree," said Elizabeth. "You have real experience, proven results, and the trust of international clients who specifically ask to work with you." The new position came with a monthly salary of $15,000, a company car, and the responsibility of overseeing all international operations. "There's one thing I want you to know," Elizabeth continued. "That video Rebecca recorded of your interview went viral internally at the company. We showed it to investors, clients, and employees. You've become a symbol that talent exists everywhere, no matter the packaging." Jennifer remembered the day she walked into that meeting room wearing a cleaning uniform, shaking with nerves. It felt like a lifetime ago. "And Richard?" she asked, curious about her former manager's fate. "He was fired for just cause the same day as your interview," Elizabeth replied. "The investigation revealed he had facilitated at least 5 irregular hires over the past 2 years. The company had to let all those involved go." "What about the nephew he wanted to hire?" "He never got the job. The position originally meant for him ended up going to Mei Lin, who was promoted to HR manager after recommending changes to the hiring process based on what she witnessed in your case." Jennifer smiled. Mei Lin had become a close friend, and they often practiced Mandarin together during lunch breaks. 3 years after that life-changing interview, Jennifer was on a plane to Shanghai, accompanied by a team of 5 company executives. They were about to sign a $100 million contract, the largest in the corporation's history. During the flight, she gazed out the window and reflected on how her life had transformed. Emma was in her junior year of high school, with a full scholarship to one of the best private schools in New York City, and had already received early acceptance to 3 universities. Ethan had honed his programming skills and developed an app now being used by his mother's own company. Lily, now 11, spoke 4 languages fluently and dreamed of becoming a diplomat. Michael had returned to work part-time as a workplace safety consultant, specializing in accident prevention after his own experience. The couple had bought their own home in Brooklyn and were planning a trip to Europe so Jennifer could visit some of the countries whose languages she had learned. Jennifer's company had become a national leader in intercultural communication. She had been invited to speak at universities, appear on television programs, and write articles for industry magazines. But the most special moment of her journey had happened 6 months before the trip to China. Jennifer had organized a company event called Stories That Transform, where employees could share their personal journeys of overcoming challenges. During the event, a young cleaning staff member approached Jennifer. "Mrs. Jennifer, my name is Ashley. I speak 5 languages, but I never had the courage to mention it." Jennifer smiled, remembering herself years ago. "What languages do you speak, Ashley?" "English, Spanish, French, Arabic, and Mandarin. I learned them from my employer's family when I worked as a housekeeper." "And why didn't you mention it when you were hired here?" "Because I thought no one would believe me. A polyglot janitor," Ashley said, unconsciously repeating the words Richard had used years earlier. Jennifer took Ashley's hands. "I'll introduce you to Elizabeth tomorrow. We have an open position in the International Communications Department that would be perfect for you." Ashley began to cry. "You'd do that for me?" "Ashley, 4 years ago, someone gave me an opportunity when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to do the same for you." 6 months later, Ashley had been promoted to project coordinator for Spanish and French, overseeing negotiations with companies in Latin America and France. During the flight to Shanghai, Jennifer wrote in her journal a reflection on her journey. "Today I realized that interview wasn't just about getting a job. It was about discovering that our worth isn't determined by the circumstances we're born into, but by what we do with the talents we've been given. Every language I learned carried the story of someone who had lost their homeland, their family, their dreams. By learning their languages, I didn't just gain skills, I gained the responsibility to honor their memories and use that knowledge to build bridges between cultures. The meeting in Shanghai was an absolute success. Jennifer led the entire negotiation in fluent Mandarin, impressing the Chinese executives with her knowledge not only of the language, but also of the cultural nuances that fostered mutual understanding. "How did you learn our language so perfectly?" asked the Chinese company's CEO during a celebratory dinner. Jennifer shared the story of Mr. Wong, the elderly Chinese man who had spent 2 years in silence at the retirement home until she learned Mandarin to speak with him. "He taught me more than words," she said. "He taught me about patience, respect for elders, and how true communication goes far beyond just understanding the language." The CEO was so moved that he invited Jennifer to meet his own family when she returned to China. On the flight back to the United States, Elizabeth sat beside Jennifer. "You know what impresses me most about you," Elizabeth said. "What?" "You've never lost your humility. With all your success, all your promotions, you're still the same woman who walked into our company just hoping to find stability for her family." Jennifer looked out the airplane window, watching the lights of New York City draw closer. "Elizabeth, I never forget where I came from. Every time I walk into that conference room where I had my first interview, I remember that woman in a cleaning uniform who was shaking with nerves. She still lives inside me. And that's why you're an exceptional leader," Elizabeth said, "because you understand that talent exists everywhere, just waiting for an opportunity." 5 years after that life-changing interview, Jennifer was invited to give a TEDx talk on the transformative power of intercultural communication. The auditorium was packed with over 3,000 people. "When I walked into that interview room 5 years ago," she began, her voice echoing through the hall, "I wasn't just looking for a job. I was looking for a chance to prove that a person's worth isn't in the clothes they wear or the degree they hold, but in the contribution they can make to the world." For 40 minutes, she told her story, weaving in phrases from different languages that demonstrated how each one carried a culture, a history, a unique way of seeing the world. "Every language I learned taught me something different," she said. "Italian taught me about passion and family, Mandarin about patience and ancestral wisdom, German about precision and determination, Arabic about hospitality and faith. Each language expanded not just my ability to communicate, but my ability to understand humanity." The audience gave her a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. After the talk, dozens of people approached Jennifer to share their own stories. A Haitian woman who spoke 4 languages, but worked only as a housekeeper, a Syrian refugee who had been an engineer in his home country, but couldn't validate his degree in the United States, a Venezuelan teacher who had become a street vendor. "You've seen my story," said Jennifer to the group that had gathered around her. "Now let's write yours. I'll share your contacts with partner companies that value diversity and talent, regardless of background." In the following months, Jennifer helped over 50 people find job opportunities that matched their actual qualifications. She had created an informal support network for immigrants and people in socially vulnerable situations. Jennifer's story continued to inspire change. The American Business Corporation established a scholarship program for employees across all departments, allowing people like her to study while working. The program became a national model and was adopted by dozens of other companies. Richard, the former manager who had mocked Jennifer, tried to re-enter the job market but faced difficulties. His reputation had been tarnished by the discovery of his corrupt practices. He ended up opening a small consulting firm where he learned firsthand the value of honesty and meritocracy. Ironically, 3 years later, Richard sought Jennifer's help. "Jennifer, I know I have no right to ask anything after what I did," he said, visibly humbled, "but I need a translator for a project and I heard you have an excellent team." Jennifer stared at him for a few seconds before responding. "Richard, I'll help you, but not for business. I'll help you because I believe people can change." The project was successful, and Richard sent Jennifer a letter weeks later. "Jennifer, I want you to know that interview changed 2 lives that day. Yours for the better, and mine to teach me that prejudice and arrogance are the greatest enemies of true success. Thank you for giving me a second chance when I didn't deserve it." 10 years after that transformative interview, Jennifer had become the international director of a corporate group with businesses in 12 countries. Emma had graduated from medical school and was completing her residency in pediatrics. Ethan had founded a tech startup that developed real-time translation apps. Lily was in her first year of international relations at New York University. Michael had become a motivational speaker, sharing his own story of resilience after the accident that nearly destroyed his family. The family had traveled to 15 countries, visiting the homelands of the languages Jennifer had learned. In Sicily, they visited Mrs. Sophia's hometown. In China, they met Mr. Wong's family. In each place, Jennifer carried memories of the elderly who had taught her not just words but life lessons. But the most emotional moment of Jennifer's journey came on an ordinary workday, 15 years after her first interview. A young woman in a cleaning uniform knocked on her office door. "Dr. Jennifer, may I speak with you?" "Of course, come in. What's your name?" "Sophia. I speak 7 languages, but I'm afraid to talk about it." Jennifer smiled, feeling as if time had come full circle. "Which languages do you speak, Sophia?" "Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, English, German, and Japanese. I learned them working for diplomats' families." "And why are you afraid to mention it?" "Because once I tried to bring it up in an interview and everyone laughed at me. They said a multilingual cleaner was impossible." Jennifer stood and walked to her office window, overlooking New York City. From the 40th floor, she could see St. Joseph's retirement home in the distance, where it had all begun. "Sophia, let me tell you a story," Jennifer said, turning to face the young woman. "It's about a woman who once walked into an interview room wearing a janitor's uniform and said she spoke 11 languages. Everyone laughed at her too." Over the next hour, Jennifer told her whole story to Sophia, from her early days at the retirement home to her current position. "And do you know the most important part of this whole story?" Jennifer asked at the end. "What?" "That I would never have gotten here if I hadn't had the courage to say that day that I spoke 11 languages, even knowing they might laugh at me." Sophia was crying. "Do you think I have a chance?" "Sophia, I'll do better than that. I'll create a position specifically for you in my department. You'll start as an international communications assistant with a salary of $5,000 and a structured career plan." 6 months later, Sophia had been promoted to Japanese project coordinator and was managing million-dollar contracts with companies in Japan. Jennifer's story spread worldwide through social media, books, documentaries, and talks. She became a global symbol that talent and determination can overcome any social barrier. Universities began using her case as an example in business and human resources courses. Multinational companies changed their hiring processes to be more inclusive and focused on real skills. St. Joseph's retirement home, where it all began, became a center of excellence in intercultural communication. Jennifer had created a program where college students visited elderly immigrants to learn languages and life stories, creating a virtuous cycle of knowledge and compassion. One Friday afternoon, 20 years after that life-changing interview, Jennifer was organizing her files when she found the resume she had brought that day. It was a simple sheet, printed at home, with basic information and a timid line mentioning knowledge of foreign languages. She smiled, remembering the unsure woman who had written those words, never imagining that this humble line would open doors to a completely transformed life. Just then, her secretary walked into the office. "Dr. Jennifer, there's a letter for you." The letter was from Mrs. Sophia, now 92 years old, still living at St. Joseph's retirement home. In shaky handwriting, she had written in Italian, "My dear Jennifer, I heard your story on television and cried with joy. When I taught you Italian, I thought I was just passing the time. I didn't know I was planting a seed that would grow and change so many lives. Thank you for honoring our friendship and for showing the world that knowledge has no borders. With love, your teacher, Sophia." Jennifer kept the letter close to her heart and in her desk, safe. It was proof that every encounter in our lives, no matter how simple it may seem, can carry the power to transform not only our destiny, but the destiny of all those we touch along the way. That evening at home during dinner with her family, Jennifer looked around the table. Michael was reading the newspaper, commenting on international politics. Emma, now a respected doctor, was planning a specialization in France. Ethan proudly showed growth charts from his company. Lily, an international relations student, practiced Mandarin pronunciation for a university presentation. "Do you know what I've learned these past 20 years?" Jennifer said, gently interrupting the conversations. Everyone turned to her. "That our story is never just about us alone. It's about all the people we meet, who teach us, who give us opportunities, and all those for whom we can open doors in the future." Michael held her hand. "And you've opened many doors, my love." "And I'll keep opening them," Jennifer replied, smiling. "Because every time I see someone being underestimated because of their background or appearance, I remember that woman in a cleaning uniform who once said she spoke 11 languages and was met with laughter." "And now?" asked Lily. "What do you plan to do next?" Jennifer looked out the window, watching the lights of the city that had become her home and the stage for her transformation. "I'm going to write a book telling this whole story, and the royalties will fund a national program to identify and nurture talent in underprivileged communities, because I know there are thousands of Jennifers out there just waiting for someone to believe in their potential." End of story. Now tell me, what did you think of this story of overcoming and transformation? Do you know anyone who has gone through similar situations? What lessons would you take for your own life? Leave your honest comment sharing your thoughts. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.